Testing for the sound. Does everyone hear me? All right. Thank you very much to the organizers. Thank you to my esteemed panelists. Hello, everyone. My name is Karine Badre. I work as a policy analyst at the OECD. Our panel, as you can see, is called Communicating in the Digital Age, and we hope to give you just a few of the latest thinking on challenges and opportunities in this field. So, starting out with the basics, if we can move to the first slide, please. I do have my clicker, indeed. Independence, agency. Up. Here we go. So, basically, at the OECD, you can see the definition at the bottom left. We have identified 3 roles for public communication, as separate to the extent possible, of course, from political communication. So for us, this is basically, the first one is a means to foster an informed public, the second being an instrument to support the development of policies and services, and then the third key role for public communication that we've identified at the OECD is a vehicle to rebuild trust through dialogue and working on mis and disinformation. So over the past 5 years, we've been gathering evidence on specifically this. We've been trying to understand how OECD countries are working to achieve these 3 roles through their public communication. You can see on the screen a few of the publications that we worked on. There's an international report. There's a focus on good practice principles on mis and disinformation. There are country studies, etc. And all of this is based on the OECD Public Communication Network, which is a growing international community of public sector communication practitioners and experts. 2 last slides, and then I give the floor to my panelists with the first questions. I just wanted to, as an introduction to this panel, to point to these 2 elements that we are hoping to see digital communication improve in a way. So the first one is basically about what we've identified as key attributes for the public communication function. So what makes public communication effective? Effective communication, so far from what we've seen from OECD practice, is communication that is inclusive, so that reaches diverse groups and is tailored to their needs. It's communication that is responsive, so that reflects listening, allows interaction, closes the feedback loop, but also that is compelling, that stands out in a crowded information space, and that basically pushes people to act and change their perceptions for the common good and for the benefit of the citizen. So I'm looking forward to your ideas on whether you think digital communication is actually helping with these attributes. And then final slide for me, our research is increasingly showing how communication adds value throughout the policy cycle. And we know that basically this role deserves greater recognition and greater investment. So also hoping to see if you think some of the digital tools will actually help with that. I'll start off with the first question that is quite general for all 3 panelists, just to get a sense of how helping us frame the issue. So the first one is, what do you see coming up as the major opportunities and threats for digital communication in the public sector? And Tom, you're the first on my left, so go ahead.
Sure. Thanks, Karine, and thanks to our esteemed hosts. So I'm a communications consultant, and as part of my work, I have been working with the OECD's public communications team on a working paper talking about exactly this, public communication in the digital age. And it means I've been speaking to a lot of public communicators, listening to their hopes, their dreams, their anxieties, what keeps them up at night. And it's obviously been a very diverse kind of feedback that I've gotten. You hear all sorts of different things, from a fragmented digital information environment with platforms changing hands, being bought by people and being slightly less fun as a result, to new tools like AI, to trying to figure out the applications of data in their work. And it's been it varies quite a lot by geography. For example, in the Baltics, they think an awful lot about mis and disinformation, whereas in the UK, they're thinking a lot more about AI. So that's one element of it, but there's also quite a strong individual element. You see a lot of people who kind of have the skills and know-how taking the lead to inform their organizations and build capacities. So it's quite varied, but some things are common, and you will often see that a lot of the challenges that come with being a public sector communicator are common among them, among the interviewees. Things like the limitation of risk being a major focus of public sector communicators. This is really clear in the realm of AI, where you see people with, where you see a much more incremental, gradual approach, even in places where people want to take steps forward. So, and then in other areas too, like the application of data in targeting and profiling. So these elements are, there's some super interesting patterns emerging, I think, and some new views. I look forward to I'll stop meandering on now and pass the floor over to my colleague.
Thank you very much for the question and, of course, for the invitation to take part in this very exciting summit. My interests in recent years has been moving from the world of social media to the world of artificial intelligence, which is a domain that several of my previous speakers also have mentioned, signaling its importance for the majority of communicators as well as decision makers present at this summit, and not only. So I wanted to take a little bit of a moment to identify what do we talk about when we talk about artificial intelligence. And I'm using, obviously, the OECD definition.
Sorry, just the slide is not up for Anna Maria. There we go, great. And maybe if you can move the mic a little closer, because we hear you with an echo.
Okay, sorry, technical questions. But anyway, so back to what we mean by AI, because many times I have noticed people using AI as a sort of buzzword, as a sort of marketing trick, saying this communication is powered by AI. But what do we mean by AI? And I'm using the, as I said, you can read behind me the OECD definition of what AI means, which means that there's some form of technology, some form of computer software that has some degree of autonomy while being closely connected to human control and supervision, and while being bounded by a specific domain. And some examples of what AI can do for communicators fall into these kind of three general buckets: computer vision, natural language processing, and speech recognition. Computer vision is basically teaching computers to see and identify what they see. Natural language processing is teaching computers to understand language and generate language, and speech recognition is more or less what it says, teaching computers to recognize what is being said. These technologies specifically pose, in my view, three opportunities for AI use in public communication. And I wanted to also, before going any further, to reiterate little what my colleague Tom was saying before, namely that public communication is different than regular communication from companies or from individual social media influencers and the like. The public sector communication comes with the weight of responsibility and accountability. So it's a different kind of communication with an emphasis on the public and the public sectors. So keep that in mind when I refer to these particular three domains, which I see AI being particularly useful. One is about improving accessibility of information. And there are many ways in which this can happen. Probably what I enumerate here are the most obvious and immediate time-wise modes. The first one is the obvious facilitation of translation. Basically enabling government communication, institutional communication to be accessible to a wide range of languages present in the community. For example, in minority languages that normally would never get acknowledged, now they can be visible online and basically be given equal representation together with the majority language. Some people before me also mentioned the idea of chatbots. AI chatbots are not just something for customer service, for airline services. This can be definitely adapted for governmental purposes. It can, those chatbots can be trained for responding to most common citizen concerns, most common citizen questions, as well as helping citizens navigate a rather complex and bureaucratic heavy system of forms, of requests of information coming from the government. So it's a form of optimizing the interface between the government and the citizens. Which leads obviously to a more inclusive communication, reduces the digital divide between those citizens that have access to education and infrastructure and those who don't. Also the digital divide across ages, with older generations being less likely to use computers compared to the younger ones. So that's one inclusivity, but also inclusivity for those with functional variation. For example, using computers to translate spoken language into sign language, or to convert written text to spoken language to those who have visual impairments. There can even be entire chatbots that are voice assistant in the same spirit as Siri or Alexa, to relate to something that we use maybe in the everyday. The second point is that where AI can use public sector communication is the improved quality of information. So not only accessibility, but also the content of that information. And this subject has been already a little bit touched upon by earlier speakers, but I will reiterate here some of the interesting capabilities that are now available with the help of AI technology, such as the detection of problematic content. And here I think about both deep fakes and any other manipulated media, which can be identified with the help of AI. So in a sense, AI produced the misinformation or the manipulation, but AI can also help us detect it. So AI in the service of truth, if you wish. But also AI can help content moderation. And this is something that social media platforms themselves are currently doing with the help of AI. I think Facebook uses AI to detect up to 99% of all the fake accounts and speech hate that happens on their platform. And the third arena where AI can really be a positive force, I think, is improved public deliberation, which is another point of democratic citizenship. And that can happen by allowing citizens to get relevant and up-to-date information about those issues that are on the governmental agenda. And this can happen at the national level, but also at subnational levels, like the local or the regional governments. And also to facilitate the communication and participation in public deliberation, for example, by using chatbot prompts, which we know has been tested in local settings and has generated much more interesting and vibrant discussions than in their absence. I think I'll stop here with my presentation. Yes. And I can maybe pick up my slides for the critique part afterwards. So thank you.
Do you want them not chat for the slides? Go ahead.
Hello. I truly appreciate being here in this very esteemed forum. So far, I met many interesting professionals. I'm still learning from many of them. So in this sense, you know, I thank the organizers and also the OECD for having me on board. My perspective is a perspective of a public communication professional and practitioner, which often or always have to deliver and provide solutions So in this sense, to embrace the possible benefits and threats of public communication in contemporary digital environment, I would shortly summarize what's been said many times today. We on the executive side, we should get our act together, and I will argument this in 3 points. First of all, we should go back to the basics and fundamentals of the concept of public communication, which is based on democratic principles and professional standards of providing qualitative government information, providing transparency, accountability, involvement of stakeholders. This is really important to remind of course, public communication as performed by public institutions has to be done in a responsible way, you know, advocating the public good, the common good, and not to be lured into any kind of marketing or competing strategies, as it was already mentioned. So it's really important to keep in mind the very important division between political communication and political marketing, which is very, very present in our contemporary democracies under a lot of strain. Second of all, I should say that we should do a better work. We should provide better products. In the digital environment, of course, the public communication function remains the same, but still we need to adapt in techniques, in channels, and also in messaging. And in this sense, you know, the stories and the products provided, of course, have to be based on truthful evidence, but still attempt to be more illustrative, creative, involving people, lifetime stories, showing, not telling in linear way, and in this sense, trying also to use best practices, experience, and positive alternatives. Also, as it was mentioned, working with empathy. My last point, of course, our democracies face unprecedented complex global crises in many ways, from wars to migration to pandemics. And in this sense, it's obvious that our existing government structures, modes of functioning and living are under enormous strain. And actually, our governments are in continuous crisis management, which causes difficult, also conflictual relations with citizens and losing trust. But let us remember that the term to communicate originates from Latin word communicare, which is actually not just communication, but it's sharing, participating, building community. So I would appeal in this sense that we embrace also the digital technologies and its potential to build and strengthen communities, not just on national levels, but also transnationally and locally. So I would stop with these 3 introductory points and provide concrete examples to support them in our further discussion.
Thank you very much. Second round of question. Tom, can you, I mean, when we talk about digital communication, one of the first things that comes to mind is data. So what, in your views, are the different ways in which the public sector can leverage data?
So there are 4 ways that I can conceive of. The first, and I kind of talk about them from the most common and applied to slightly more rare for public sector communicators. And then everybody can correct me later and tell me that there's many more than 4 ways. But the first way, which I find to be in conversations with other public communicators incredibly common, is the use of data as a persuasive tool in itself. So using data to back up your points, using data visualization to tell a story, for example, which is becoming increasingly popular. So data can be the subject of communications. But then we also use it as communicators to reflect internally on our own performance. And this reflection can help us decide what platforms we should be on, the ways in which we should message and communicate, the styles we should adopt. But it also can determine where budgets should be allocated and where there are more, where we might get more bang for our buck. Then we can also use it to look outwards a little more, to monitor the conversations going on in the world and determine where our voices are needed and where we should go and speak. But monitoring is only one part. We also need to listen. So this is kind of stringing together pieces of data to tell a story to ourselves that will help us make better strategic decisions. We used to do that. I used to work in the European Commission, and one of the ways we would do that is we would have a kind of a mixture of qualitative and quantitative data where we would monitor the use of keywords in COVID, and then at the same time engage in community conversations. To come back to your point on community management and its importance in cultivating a community, we would, on that basis, we would have conversations with our community to try and figure out what we should talk about next, how we could address their needs better, which is exactly where we're supposed to be as public communicators, as providing a service. And then finally, the last area where we tread a little more carefully as public communicators is in profiling and targeting, which can be an incredibly useful tool to connecting with some of the less, the harder to reach communities. And again, in our research, in our interviews, that has been a theme that's come up. But at the same time, we need to, as public communicators, we tend to be a bit more risk averse and careful, because if you're communicating, you need to communicate to the broad audience as well, and you can't really be seen to deliver messages in a hidden way, in a way that is inaccessible to the broader public. So this one is one that I feel like public communicators are still struggling with, and then I'm sure many, many more, but I won't sit and list them all.
That's an excellent transition to Anna Maria, risks and tensions, and this being considered as something, risky for communicators to do. So even more risks with AI?
I think the one point that I must explicitly agree with Tom is this idea of being very careful or risk averse when it comes to the public sector communication. Governments tend not to be early adopters of technology, even though it's also they themselves who can help implement those technologies elsewhere. But when it comes to their own use of it, I think they apply what we call the precautionary principle in order to make sure that they are truly inclusive and democratic and they don't risk something unnecessarily. So I do think that because of this precautionary principle, the incidence of using AI in the government or by the government communication is very low. Practically, there are very, very few pilot type of projects. And so we don't know yet whether they are really risky or not, but the principle is let's wait and see. And I think in order for this communication mode to be enhanced by AI, we need to look at certain qualities of this technology that need to be in place. The first one is this kind of trustworthiness that the EU, through the guidelines by the high level for AI ethical guidelines proposition by the group of experts, highlight three things. One, it has to be legal, it has to be ethical, and it has to be robust. So these qualities need to be baked into the technology before it can be done.
I'll add to that the OECD principles on AI as well that echo these ones that you've mentioned, Jess.
Which means basically the governments feel that the technology doesn't have these attributes yet. Also, another fear that I've noticed in discussions with governmental representatives in the comm sector is that the feeling that humans are not necessarily in control which may be a misrepresentation, but that leads me to another obstacle in implementing AI, which is namely the knowledge and skills in the communicator core about how to use AI, how to have an AI co-pilot, how to have an AI co-worker. How do you work together? Because let's be honest, no one is going to make good comms with AI alone. ChatGPT, in all honor, but it's not going to write your strategy by itself. However, whenever we have a human working in harmony with an AI co-pilot, the result is likely to be much better than, or at least much faster than human alone. So I think another obstacle is this knowledge and skill training that doesn't seem to exist in governmental sector as well as in some other sectors when it comes to AI. So there's a learning curve that a lot of governmental staff needs to be embarking on as we speak.
Thanks a lot. I might have a follow-up question later if we have time. Christina, when you left your function in the government, social media was on the rise. Countries were trying to, get up to speed on how to use it. Everyone was supposed to be, it was a no-brainer. Everyone was supposed to be on social media, and that was where we were trying to get at. And now, basically, I mean, with this kind of, in hindsight, do you feel like governments have been able to respond to the public expectations of being more and more on these platforms? Has it been used to increase inclusiveness and participation?
Exactly. Thank you, Karine, for your introductory question. Exactly. When I started my mandate as the Director of Government Communication Office on 1st of September in 2015, basically a major migration went through 2 million people nation, Slovenia. There were like 500,000 migrants passing through. And when I finished my mandate in March 2020, the biggest global crisis as pandemic of COVID-19 just started. So basically, the first social post. It's not working.
The top, yes.
Sorry. So the first post, about COVID disease, which included quite a lot of information what this disease is and was prepared by National Institute for Public Health, actually skyrocketed the reach on government social media. It was unprecedented. You must bear in mind that, Slovenia is a 2 million people nation, so 250,000, reach is like skyrocketing. You might note that there is like this initial information given by World Health Organization that the mortality rate is still lesser than the mortality rate with the flu, but you must bear in mind that this is, the infographics from the start of the March. And it was followed by further action provided by government. Actually, the most efficient tool that was a crisis call center where senior students of medicine under the supervision of specialists in infectious diseases were responding to questions to citizens. So the post announcing this call center was also extra exponential. But even more importantly so, this crisis center proved to be by itself the most efficient tool of providing necessary information and even more providing open channel for interaction with citizens, for expressing their fears, frustrations, doubts, and in this sense also countering the many misinformation. And of course, maybe the last interesting how people's nature, how we work, was the post after the first round of the epidemic in June that all the restrictive measurements will be banned, and there was like a very echoed interview on Euronews, and of course people were happy, and that's why the reach was so forth. So not just to provide you a historical perspective, but still looking into today's world. As I told you, we are living in poly-crisis world, and apart from all the external factors and crisis situations in our countries, obviously we all have also enormous natural disasters. Also Slovenia was flooded this summer in catastrophic floods. Many people lost their homes. And this is a post that reached the highest reach, which makes my point. Basically, people were caught in the floods, in their homes, on the roofs, or wherever. So there was police helicopters saving them. And this is a very simple post telling people, you know, in what kind of pose they should present themselves if they want help. So in this sense, you know, my argument goes that, you know, the social posts should in particular serve the life-threatening or life-saving functions, and in this sense they're highly followed. Of course, police has special reach in each of our countries. Then the second, not just post, but also platform, in sense building a community. It was like a special web page provided by the Civil Protection Force, and at this web page any individual, company, organization could apply for help or provide help. So in this sense, this platform was a unique humanitarian or like solidarity tool, but in the other sense, the authorities, the official institutions provided a structural, organized, systemic humanitarian action. Maybe just to conclude on, you know, my point, also looking into other posts, you know, surprisingly or maybe not, still people don't mind if the government posts it and congratulates successful sportsmen. Probably you know Tadej Pogačar, the famous cyclist, and also Slovene handball players. And in this sense, I was like nicely surprised that people still feel that this kind of community can be also greeted by government, because otherwise people don't like government or official institutions intruding in their communities and lifestyle circles. And maybe the last one, which was I was always also surprised. Also, our government is trying hard, you know, to market itself, and among many postings about the Prime Minister being here and there are also infographics, and it's interesting that this infographic talking about employment rate, showing that the employment rate in Slovenia is among the lowest in the EU, also reached let's say high levels in comparison to other. So in this sense, I would argue that the use of applications and online platform can be in full function, of course, and this would be my last point, if this is supported by action, and in particular in specific crisis situation, by immediate presence and deliverance on the spot, with solutions for people in need. And in this sense, you know, social media, of course, they are not almighty, they have a specific potential, but they come together in a specific mix and in synergetic effect with other tools and techniques and approaches. In particular, we should not forget live communication, on-spot engagement of people, and of course, most of all, as all executives, we have to deliver. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christina. And since we're just a little bit of a small group, I will invite any questions. I think all of us would be happy to take any of your questions outside or tomorrow morning. So thank you very much to the panelists. Thank you to the organizers. Thank you to the participants who have stayed so long to watch us.